Thank you. Just give me a few moments, and I'm not the best on technology, so just bear with me, I'm a beekeeper. Look, today I'm going to briefly go through with tips and hints for you, and I'll go through that quite quick because I think there's a lot of you that really want to ask me a lot of questions about the Varroa. There's some answers I can't give you because it's still a little bit, it's still very raw at the moment and we are in planning, so bear with me. I'm not sidestepping your answers. I'll answer them as truthful as possible. But I'll get on to my presentation. And look, today, tips and hints. This is just from my perspective. It's not gospel. It's what I've learnt over 30 years of pollinating various crops. The areas that I want to address is like talking to your grower, your manager. Look at where your bees are being placed. Know the crop that you're pollinating. It's one of the biggest key issues that people do not realise. We have a bee, we have a crop. I can't tell the bees just to go to that crop. I'll talk more on that in depth as I come to that point. Contracts, having your bees prepared. Chemicals, anyone who's been a grower has had bees there has had an issue with beekeepers saying about chemicals, and I'll come to that as well. And the last little area, but the biggest issue at the moment on all our tongues, is varroa mite. Talking to your grower, go in to meet your grower, meet your beekeeper, get a relationship going. It's key. It's like a personal relationship. If you don't talk together, how do you know which one of you what each one wants? If you want an area done in a certain way, if you want an area done this way, if you want a certain amount of bees, you want them brought in at different times, these are all things that you need to discuss before you start pollinating. It is also paramount that you know what's happening on that farm. If your grower doesn't know your beekeeper, how does he contact them? How does your beekeeper contact your grower? Who does he contact? These are all things that you need to establish before you start bringing in your bees. Where the bees are going to be placed. Another great thing. There's no use just plonking them out in the middle of nowhere. They mightn't work what they're doing. They could be in the road of tractors. They could be in the road of other amenities like toilets and parking areas and all these sorts of things. There's no use putting them way down the paddock if you've got a target crop next door. You've got to work where they're going to work efficiently for you, and that comes into your beekeeper. I'll just go back to what Alan said and in the last little bit of presentation, and that's we're tracking the bees. There's no use having bees in an area that's not going to work your crop. So knowing where you're going to have your bees placed is paramount. People go, know the crop. Every crop is different. Bees work every crop differently. There's no use coming to me saying, hey, come and pollinate almonds. I'm not an almond pollinator. My bees must be set up for that crop. So if I don't set my bees up, you could be wasting your time, you're wasting your money, and you're not going to get the yield that you're going to get. So if your beekeeper doesn't come and ask you questions, ask him questions, or her. And this is the area. This is what we want to do. Know the crop you're working, knowing how to work it, and how to set your hives for it. Contracts. Another bit of a controversial area. How many of you have bees come onto your land? A lot of you. How many of you have contracts? It's good to see, a lot. The reason why I say about contracts is if you don't have a contract, how do you know what people want from each other? If you have it written down, it's a lot better than having a verbal agreement. Verbal agreements are fine while everything's going okay, but when things turn sour, I'll guarantee you everyone will run the different direction and say, oh, you never said that, you never done this, oh, I never done that. So have it written down, and that way you know what you've got and what you're in place for. And it doesn't have to be complicated. If you want to go to solicitors and have a great big 10-page document drawn up, that's up to you. But just know what you expect from each other. Having your bees prepared for your crop, like what I said before. I work from mountainous areas right to the coast, and we've got different temperatures. The bees have got to be set differently. I've got to have different stores. I've got to have different brood patterns and all this sort of stuff. So turning around there going, oh, it's a box of bees, it's a box of bees. No, it's not. A box of bees is only a box of bees if it's working properly. And that comes across right through from pollination to honey. There's no use going to honey when I've got my bees full. There's no use going to pollination if my bees are starving. They've got to be strong, they've got to be right to work. They've got to work properly for everyone. I know this is a real controversial one. Chemical kills. A lot of people think that, bees just die from chemicals. There is certain trees in the bush here that will kill our bees. It's called a thin honey. So what happens at certain times of the year, we have a high moisture or a dew or anything like this, and it thins the honey. And what actually happens, it ferments in the bee gut, and the bee can't burp. So she either dies from it or she's rolling around on the ground. I've been in the bush where I've seen rainbow lorikeets rolling around on the ground, drunk as skunks. You can walk over and pick them up. They bite like hell, but you can pick them up. But here we're talking about a chemical kill. Coming back to what I was saying before, knowing your farmer, knowing your manager, and all this sort of thing. If they have to spray, who do you contact? If you don't know your beekeeper, you can't get things moved. But your beekeeper should know what chemicals may be benefit to the bees or detrimental to the bees. Talk to them. If they're really dangerous, it might be worthwhile moving the bees out and then moving the bees back in. These are all things that we need to address. But chemical kills, if we don't report them, we can't get the chemical companies to change their attitudes. Okay, let's touch on the real subject at the moment. It's on everyone's lips. Varroa mite. We didn't want to see it here in Australia. It's been here for 6 weeks today. There's no country in the world that has defeated it. We've killed 4,000 hives so far. We think we've got it contained. But I have beekeepers moving bees and not telling us. As growers, if you have bees on your property, you are liable as well. If someone brings, in New South Wales at the moment, if you have bees come onto your property, you are liable as well. So it's not just the beekeepers. We need to work together. This whole thing is working together, otherwise we will not beat it. And if you think that it's easy to get around, this will kill 80% of the bees in Australia in the first 2 years. With that said, that will drive your price of your pollination up, because now with less hives, it means more in-depth working of the hives. So now you can see why we are trying to eradicate. Our best plan is to eradicate, and that's where we're at the moment. So don't take Varroa lightly, is all I can say there. I'm just going to quickly recap on the others and then I'll take questions. So get to know your beekeeper. Your beekeeper needs to get to know you. Look where the bees are being placed. Make sure they're not in your way. They're going to be the most advantage to your farm. Make sure your beekeeper knows the crop that they're pollinating. Have a contract, simple, whatever, very easy, written down. Make sure your bees are prepared, and make sure that chemical kills are reported. So that's my main overview of my talk. Hit me with your questions.
We had a bit of an issue in New Zealand where there were chemical residues forming in the honey from basically growers spraying something on. It wasn't killing the bees. The bees were getting in, pollinating the crop, but then taking back that residue on their feet, their tarsi, and effectively contaminating the honey. Has there been any issues like that in Australia? And if so, how do you get on top of it?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. With chemical residues, whether they are for glyphosate or anything like this, they're always going to be there. We can't pull all the bees out. The bees will actually land on it. They take it in on their feet. Our biggest problem is, say, an insecticide which actually will go into the brood, and that'll stay in the actual frames, because like wax is very absorbent. So what happens there, if the bee walks on something, it may not kill that adult bee, but when she goes back inside, it actually kills the brood. So what actually happens then is a beehive deteriorates because we can't get young bees coming through. Without young bees coming through, we don't have the foragers. This is where we see the residues. In the honey, it's the same thing. Glyphosate's been found all around the world, and the biggest problem with it, we walk along, we spray out the front of our hives, we do all this sort of stuff. So it's a liquid. The bees can actually drink it up and they use the liquid. So it's a real hard one to actually control. But what we're doing and what chemical companies are doing is looking for chemicals that are more beneficial and aren't as, don't use MRLs or they don't leave traces or anything like this. So the chemical companies are working with us, but it's a slow process. They've already got chemicals out there that they've already designed. Why redesign another one? So, there.
Thanks. I've got two questions. The first one is, how do you identify a bee that's been affected by chemicals, whether it's died or like by its activity? And the second question is, what's your opinion on bee attractants and how do they affect bees as individuals and general hive health?
Right. The first one's real easy. If you pick up a bee and she has her tongue out and her wings at a K, that is usually a chemical kill. If she's just naturally died, she'll be curled up, but her wings are still together and on her back. Tongue's not drawn out. Tongue can be drawn out if it's a little bit starvation, but usually you find them in the hive. So chemical out the front, tongue's out, wings at a K. That is a chemical kill. And sorry, your second party. Bee attractants. Going to come back to a point. I don't believe in them. All right, that's simple. I believe if my hives are set up right, I don't need attractants. That's up to my expertise or the beekeeper's expertise to make those bees work your crop. So I believe that if you've got to put a bee attractant on there, something's not right. No.
I was wondering if you could take us through the means by which this varroa mite is spread, and also what roles would the native or wild bee population have in the spread of this disease, and how are you going to control them?
Another good question. Okay, on the 22nd of June, varroa was detected at the port of Newcastle. Everything at the moment's been traced to one area, and the bees at Narrabri, Nana Glen have been transported there for a certain reason. Narrabri were transported there for breeding, and Nana Glen were brought there, they say, in April for pollination purposes. So a varroa usually travels about 3 kilometres. That's where a bee flies. So if you take varroa off the back of a bee, it's got about 5 days to survive. Without a bee, varroa can't transport, or without beekeepers. We are the most transportable of varroa. So the thing, what we're trying to do there is trace everything back. So it's not spreading like everyone's worried about it going like this real quick. It's not. It's a very slow spreader unless it's on the back of a vehicle. That's our biggest problem. All right. What we're going to do about it in the bush, that's most probably the $1 million question. We are looking at a lot of options. We have a lot of plans at the moment. Feral hives are the most probably hardest thing to organise. If this was just a managed hive problem, I could go to all the managed hives, bring them together and eradicate. But this is a Apis mellifera pest, so it does not affect the native bees. The native bees are too small, except for possibly the carpenter bee, which is bigger bee. So at this point in time, it doesn't affect your native bee, but the feral bee hives of honeybees are going to be a problem. We don't know how we're going to eradicate them yet. Any more questions?
I believe other countries have looked into miticides for the Varroa. Is that something you would look into in the future possibly, or is that ruled out?
At this point in time, we have an emergency order out for Baverol. They're using it in surveillance. It's the best way of detecting the mite in the box. So we use a sticky pad on the bottom, miticide on the top. Excuse. We haven't come to an agreement yet of what miticides we're going to use. The reason being is we don't know what they're resistant to. Varroa grilled up a resistance really, really quick. So the other problem is once we put more chemicals inside the hive, our wax becomes contaminated, our honey becomes contaminated. So at the moment, we've got a lot of ideas and a lot of planning, but we're only using Vaporol just as a surveillance tool at the moment.
I know the lady over there touched before on tractants for bees, but when farms get larger scale and have a big grid system of tunnels, no other indicators of where bees go, is there anything we can do to help bees get to and from their hives up into the middle of a 10-hectare farm that's just gridded tunnels everywhere, on, you know, not get lost and make sure they get back to their hive and then back out the next day again? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So this is something that when you're setting up a farm, I do believe you need to look at the actual size. Mono landscapes are very much they're a problem for bees. So sometimes if I feel that they're going to be a problem, might hang colours up. I've done that. But the other thing is I scatter my bees throughout the orchard so that they've got less area to cover and they can find their they find their hives a little bit easier. So yeah, hang colours up, do things like that. No, bees are very perceptive to colours, shapes, everything like that. They all work pretty well.
Just in regards to the reporting of chemical kills, is that to the beekeeper, or is there somewhere else we should be reporting those to?
I say talk to your farmer first, because sometimes it's a very logical answer. Look, when you go to report it, you'll report it to EPA. EPA will say go to DPI. DPI will say go to EPA. You need to talk to the right people. These are issues because, like as I said, a lot of the times it's not that the farmer or whoever sprayed them intentionally sprayed. It's sometimes the tank wasn't washed out properly. So it's like we can all jump up and down and say, oh, you kill me bees, you kill me bees. But really you've got to talk to your farmer and get to the bottom of it first and then follow the right government attitude, like right government channels through. And it usually is EPA. How are we going for time? No? More questions?
you. Back to the subject of varroa mite. Are you looking at any potential biologicals for control? In New Zealand, we've done a little bit of research on pseudoscorpions in the hive, but a bit of mixed results there.
Yeah, that's real cutting edge, that is. Look, varroa's been around for so long. America's had it for 30 years. Yous have had it over there for about 20, 25 years. You still haven't eradicated it. We wish you did, otherwise we'd bring it here. We're researching it, that's all I can say. Yeah, we're trying everything.
Just again on the varroa mite, I know that with fruit fly, there's a program to produce very potent sterile males. Is that a technique that may be applicable to varroa, or is that a different thing altogether?
The problem with varroa, they feed on the fat of the bee, not the blood of the bee. That's why we can't get it to take. So the only way we can actually kill varroa is by killing the host. If we could actually get it into the varroa, then maybe we could do something like that. So that is the biggest problem. Yeah. All right. That's most probably a really, really good question. It's important. So when a female, an adult female varroa leaves the cell, she is already mated. Her first egg that she lays is a male, and then the next 4 to 5 eggs she lays over 10 days between each is a female. That male can mate with its sisters, and when they leave that cell, then they are ready to reproduce. So you get 10 varroa today, in 50 days it's 100, in another 50 days it's 1,000. So that varroa is it usually does not have to go looking for a mate. That was the other thing. If there was a difference between finding a male and female, then that's another area we could look at. But at this point in time, she comes out and she's all ready to lay eggs. Okay. All right. I'd like to thank yous. Putting up with me.